Awaken your spirit, chosen ones. The greatest victories are won in silence, long before the battlefield even knows your name. They called you the chosen one, not out of reverence, but because they believed you were destined to fail under the weight of prophecy and expectation. Little did they know, their greatest mistake wasn't underestimating your strength, it was underestimating your patience. You didn't just defeat them, you dismantled their very essence, one calculated move at a time. Here's a fact to ponder. In chess, the queen is the most powerful piece on the board, but over 90% of winning strategies rely on sacrificing her. You understood this truth in ways your enemies couldn't fathom. Victory wasn't about brute force or flashy heroics. It was about strategy, foresight, and knowing when to burn bridges with a smile. Oh, and let's not forget the irony. They spent years building empires, armies, and walls, only to fall to someone who didn't even bother following their rules. Turns out it's hard to defend against someone who rewrites the playbook while you're still trying to figure out chapter 1. So, how did you do it? How did you defeat them, not just in battle, but in spirit? This is the story of how you didn't just survive, you conquered. And yes, you looked magnificent doing it. Number 1. You made peace with your darkness. You didn't conquer them because you were flawless. You won because you embraced every part of yourself, even the parts you were told to suppress. The darkness within you wasn't a curse. It was a weapon waiting to be wielded. While others pretended to be pure, righteous, or above their flaws, you stared your demons in the face and said, "Let's get to work." It wasn't easy. The darkness whispered things to you, tempting you to lose yourself in its chaos. But instead of fighting it blindly or ignoring its voice, you listened. You learned. You understood that denying it would make you weak, vulnerable, predictable. By facing it, you unlocked a power your enemies didn't even know existed, self-awareness. The more you understood your fears, your rage, and your pain, the more control you had over them. Your enemies expected you to crumble under your doubts or to suppress them so hard you'd eventually break. But you didn't give them that satisfaction. You let your fear sharpen your instincts. You let your anger fuel your determination. You let your pain teach you resilience. Instead of being consumed by your darkness, you made it serve you. It became the silent force behind every calculated decision, every bold move, every victory they couldn't see coming. By the time they realized what you'd done, it was too late. They were fighting someone who wasn't just strong, but someone who had no weak points left to exploit. You were whole. You were powerful. And your enemies? They fell because they didn't realize one simple truth. The only thing scarier than a chosen one is a chosen one who knows exactly who they are. At number 2, you broke their system from within. You didn't storm the gates or charge into battle screaming for victory. That's what they expected. Instead, you slipped into their ranks unnoticed, learning their every secret, weakness, and blind spot. While they were busy flaunting their power, you were already inside their system, turning gears they didn't even realize existed. The beauty of it? They never saw you as a threat. You let them think they were untouchable, invincible. You blended in, watching them from the shadows as they celebrated their invulnerability. But every celebration was an opportunity, every boast a crack in their armor. You weren't there to prove your strength. You were there to understand theirs. And once you understood it, you dismantled it piece by piece, so quietly that by the time they realized something was wrong, the whole structure was already crumbling. They called you a nobody, a background figure, someone insignificant. That's what made your moves so devastating. You didn't need an army or a loud battle cry, you needed access. And once you had it, you used their own tools, their own pride, their own rules against them. Every piece of their power turned into a weakness in your hands. When the final blow came, it wasn't a clash of swords or some grand explosion. It was the silent collapse of everything they'd built, orchestrated by someone they thought didn't matter. You didn't just defeat them, you rendered them irrelevant. They lost because they didn't understand what you already knew. The strongest fortress isn't taken by force. It's hollowed out from within until all that's left is an empty shell waiting to fall. That was their fate, and you were the one who sealed it. Number 3, you weaponized your failures. They thought your failures were the end of you. Every stumble, every mistake, every loss, they laughed, thinking it was proof that you were weak, unworthy, incapable. What they didn't realize was that those failures weren't burying you, they were building you. Every time you hit the ground, you didn't just stand back up, you got smarter, tougher, sharper. Failure became your greatest teacher. It showed you where the cracks were, not just in their plans, but in your own. You learned to adapt, to evolve. While they were basking in their victories, you were taking notes. Every scar on your body was a lesson carved into your soul, a reminder of what didn't work and why it wouldn't happen again. They thought they'd broken you, but all they did was give you the blueprint to break them instead. And when the time came, you used everything they'd handed you. The traps that caught you before, you turned them against them. The tactics they used to bring you down, you perfected them and unleashed them with precision. Even your moments of weakness became your strongest weapons, because they underestimated what someone can achieve when they've already survived the worst. In the end, they didn't lose because you were invincible. They lost because you were relentless. They lost because every failure you endured became the foundation of a victory they never saw coming. You didn't just survive defeat. You mastered it, owned it, and transformed it into a force so unstoppable that when you finally struck, it wasn't just unexpected, it was poetic. You won because you weren't afraid to fail, and that's something they could never understand. Number 4, you rewrote the rules of engagement. Your enemies relied on tradition, on rules they believed couldn't be broken. They thought battles had to follow a pattern, a script passed down through generations, predictable strategies, obvious moves, and the same tired tactics. But you didn't just refuse to play their game, you rewrote the game entirely. When they marched onto the battlefield, they expected a straightforward fight, the kind they'd won 100 times before. Instead, they found chaos. You didn't meet them where they wanted. You fought on your terms in ways they couldn't anticipate. They sent armies to crush you, but you never gave them the satisfaction of a direct clash. Their forces marched into empty fields while you hit their supply lines. They prepared for an open fight, but you turned the terrain itself against them, transforming strongholds into traps and open spaces into nightmares. Their strategies crumbled because they relied on control, and you took that control away. You didn't just adapt to their moves, you dismantled the very structure of their plans. Where they saw order, you brought unpredictability. Where they assumed victory, you let them drown in doubt. Every step forward they took felt like progress, until they realized they were walking straight into disaster. And the genius of it all? You didn't let their pride adjust. When they tried to adapt, you shifted again, staying one step ahead at every turn. Their confidence shattered not because they lost, but because they never truly knew what they were fighting. You became a force they couldn't define, an opponent who didn't follow their rules. In the end, they weren't just defeated. They were humiliated, left questioning everything they thought they understood about war. You didn't win by playing the game, you won by destroying it. Number 5, you refused to play the hero. They wanted you to be predictable. They wanted you to follow the rules of honor, to fight with righteousness, to hold on to mercy, even when it cost you everything. That's what they expected. A hero bound by ideals, easy to outmaneuver because of their need to be good. But you didn't give them that. You refused to wear the title of hero because you understood something they never could. Wars aren't won by playing nice. You did what needed to be done, no matter how uncomfortable, no matter how brutal. While others hesitated, weighed down by what was right, you moved swiftly and without apology. You didn't pause to think about how your actions would look in a story or whether people would sing your praises. You knew this wasn't about glory or legacy. This was about survival, about winning, about crushing those who sought to destroy you. Your enemies were unprepared for someone like you. They expected hesitation. You gave them decisiveness. They expected mercy. You gave them consequences. When tradition demanded you fight with honor, you laughed and rewrote the rules. You weren't there to meet expectations. You were there to shatter them. And yes, the world may never celebrate you as a hero. Your name might not be spoken in reverence, but in the end, that didn't matter. What mattered was that you survived, that you won, that those who dared to stand against you were brought to their knees. You weren't a hero with shining armor and noble speeches. You were something far more powerful, a force of nature, unstoppable and unapologetic. They'll remember you not for being righteous, but for being undeniable. Number 6. You made their strengths their weaknesses. You didn't just fight them. You studied them like a predator watches its prey. Every strength they flaunted, every advantage they leaned on, you saw it all for what it really was, an opening. What they called power, you called a blind spot. Their confidence, a weakness in disguise. You didn't just take their strengths away, you turned them into weapons aimed straight at their throats. They relied on their strongest warriors, convinced they were unbeatable. Their champions marched into battle expecting fear and surrender, but you didn't play into their egos. Instead, you exposed their arrogance. You made them overextend, lured them into traps, and forced them into situations where their strength worked against them. Their brute force couldn't save them when you dismantled their strategy piece by piece. By the time they realized they were losing, it wasn't because they weren't strong enough. It was because they'd been too proud to see their flaws. It wasn't just about warriors either. Their strategies, their fortresses, their resources, everything they thought made them untouchable became tools in your hands. You didn't waste energy destroying their defenses. You repurposed them. Their walls kept you out, but they also trapped them in. Their armies outnumbered yours, but you turned their size into chaos, forcing them to collapse under their own weight. Their pride in their power blinded them to the fact that you'd already turned it against them. In the end, they weren't defeated because they were weak. They were defeated because you understood their strengths better than they did. You didn't break them. You bent them, twisted everything they relied on until it no longer served them. Their greatest advantage wasn't taken from them. It was stolen, reworked, and unleashed with devastating precision. Number 7. You built a legacy that outlived the fight. Your victory wasn't just about the here and now. You didn't fight for a single moment of triumph. You fought to create something that would endure long after you were gone. While your enemies focused on crushing you, you were building something greater, a legacy so unshakable that even their whispers of rebellion would die before they reached the air. You didn't just conquer, you inspired. You didn't just lead, you empowered. Those who stood beside you didn't follow out of fear or blind loyalty. They stood because you gave them something bigger to believe in. You weren't just a warrior or a strategist. You became a symbol, a force of will that couldn't be extinguished. By the time your enemies realized the scope of what you'd created, it was too late. Even if they destroyed you, your legacy would continue to fight on in the hearts and minds of those you'd touched. And it wasn't just about building an army or creating alliances. You ensured that the lessons of your war became the foundation of a new order, one they could never overturn. Your influence reshaped the world in ways they couldn't undo. Every system you dismantled, every structure you rebuilt left them with no foothold to reclaim their power. Even in death, your name became a weapon. It wasn't just a memory, it was a warning. Your victories weren't just scars on their history, they were chains around their future. Every rebellion they dreamed of, every spark of resistance, was smothered by the mere thought of you. You didn't just win the fight, you ensured there would never be another. Your enemies didn't lose to a person, they lost to a legacy, one that would haunt them for generations. At number 8, you chose the battles that mattered. You understood a simple truth that your enemies never could. Not every fight is worth fighting. They mistook recklessness for courage, charging into every conflict with brute force and blind ambition. But while they wasted their strength on meaningless victories, you conserved yours. You didn't fight for pride or glory, you fought to win, and that meant choosing your battles with precision. When the odds weren't in your favor, you stepped back without hesitation. It wasn't weakness, it was strategy. While they celebrated your retreats, you were already planning your next move, biding your time, waiting for the moment they least expected. Your discipline became your greatest weapon. Where others saw opportunities for immediate gains, you saw traps and refused to step into them. You let them exhaust themselves chasing you, spreading their resources thin, and leaving their real vulnerabilities exposed. And when you struck, it wasn't random. Every move you made cut deep, inflicting wounds that wouldn't heal. You didn't waste time on surface-level victories or hollow gestures. Every battle you chose to fight had a purpose, a lasting impact that rippled far beyond the battlefield. You broke their morale, their alliances, their belief in their own invincibility. Your patience became their undoing. They mistook it for passivity, never realizing it was the calm before the storm. While they flailed, reacting to every small loss like it was the end of the world, you remained focused, striking only where it truly mattered. By the time they realized their mistake, it was too late. They had spent everything on battles that didn't count, while you had preserved your strength for the fight that would finish them. You didn't just defeat them, you outlasted them, proving that sometimes the smartest move is knowing when not to fight. Number 9. You weaponized betrayal. While your enemies were busy looking outward, focused on the fight at hand, you were looking inward, searching for cracks in their foundation. They were so certain that their alliances were unbreakable, that their people were loyal, that they never saw you working behind the scenes, manipulating the very trust they had built their empire on. You didn't need an army to defeat them. You needed doubt, and you knew exactly how to plant it. You didn't strike directly at their strongest warriors or their leaders. No, you targeted the heart of their trust. You found their allies, those they considered friends, and turned them into agents of your will. They never saw it coming. You fed them half-truths, promises, and whispers that sowed just enough discord to make them question one another. One simple suggestion, one subtle word was all it took to create a ripple in their unity. Once the first cracks appeared, you let the paranoia take root. The rumors you spread fast, each whispering of betrayal within the ranks, of secret plans, of allies turning against them. What was once a tight-knit empire of loyalty became a battlefield of suspicion. They began watching each other's backs more than they watched yours. They stopped trusting their own commanders, questioning every move, every decision, every face in the crowd. And it was that distrust, that self-doubt, that slowly ate away at their unity. By the time they realized they were fighting themselves, their empire was already crumbling from within. Their loyalty turned against them, their paranoia turned to sabotage, and their alliances fell apart like a house of cards. You didn't need to take them down with swords. You took them down with the one thing they never thought could be their downfall, their own sense of trust. You turned their strength into their greatest weakness, and from that, their empire became dust. Number 10. You struck where they believed you couldn't. They thought they had you figured out. They believed they knew your tactics, your patterns, your limitations. Every move you made, every decision you took was expected, predictable, a mere lead-up to what they thought would be your inevitable downfall. But you weren't just playing their game. You were playing theirs in a way they never imagined. You didn't just find their weaknesses, you concealed them. Every fortress, every defense they built had a crack, a blind spot, an opening. But you were brilliant in how you hid yours. You didn't attack where it was obvious, you made them believe there was nothing to attack at all. While they watched your every move, thinking they were closing in on victory, you let them overlook the one place they couldn't afford to ignore. Your genius wasn't in striking when the moment was right. It was in convincing them there was no moment at all. You led them to believe their empire was impenetrable, that you were outmatched and outclassed until they were completely blind to the truth. They grew arrogant, distracted by your feigned weakness, and they thought they could regroup and recover at their own pace. And then, when they least expected it, when they were too deep in their comfort zone to even consider a threat, you struck. The blow wasn't just powerful. It was so sudden and so precisely aimed that it shattered their entire foundation. The walls they'd built around their confidence, their security, crumbled before they could even respond. They had no time to regroup, no time to retaliate. In their arrogance, they believed they were safe, that they knew where your attacks would come from. But you made them blind to the very weakness they thought they had buried. When the final blow came, they broke. And they broke because they didn't realize it was coming until it was too late. Number 11. You stood alone by choice. You didn't need an army or an alliance to secure your victory. While others flocked to powerful friends, made deals, and trusted in numbers, you chose a different path, solitude. You didn't do it out of arrogance, nor did you see it as a weakness. You saw it as strength. You understood that when you stand alone, no one can control you, no one can betray you, no one can exploit your dependencies. Every alliance is a potential weakness. Every loyal soldier is a string that can be pulled. Every favor owed can be used against you. You saw the dangers in relying on others, and so you embraced isolation, not because you lacked support, but because you were strongest when no one could touch you. By standing alone, you were free from the compromises, the politics, and the power struggles that dragged others down. Your enemies relied on their networks, their armies, their alliances, thinking that together they were unbeatable. But all they had were liabilities. They were vulnerable to their own forces, easily divided and manipulated. You, on the other hand, couldn't be swayed. There were no ties, no hidden vulnerabilities, no betrayal waiting in the wings. You were an unbreakable force, unshackled by the very things they relied on. They couldn't understand how you managed to thrive without a support system. They underestimated the quiet power that comes from being entirely self-reliant, untouchable. You didn't need others to fight your battles. You needed only your own resolve. And that's what made you unbeatable. In the end, your isolation became your greatest strength. When they reached for a string to pull, they found nothing. They were fighting a force that wasn't just strong, but untethered, and that made you unstoppable. Number 12. You made them believe you couldn't win. You didn't just defeat them on the battlefield. You defeated them in their minds long before they ever knew what was coming. Your greatest weapon wasn't your strength or your strategy. It was your ability to make them believe they had already won. You played the long game, drawing them in with false confidence, feeding their arrogance until they couldn't see their own downfall. They thought you were beaten. They thought they had outsmarted you, cornered you, driven you to the brink. You let them think that because you knew something they didn't. When people believe victory is already in their grasp, they stop fighting with purpose. They stop being cautious, stop thinking strategically, and start making mistakes. They grow complacent. And that's when the real battle begins. You allowed them to feel the thrill of triumph, let them revel in the illusion of control. They relaxed, their guard dropped, their focus waned. And just when they were convinced their victory was inevitable, that's when you struck. The blow you delivered wasn't just physical, it was psychological, a sudden, overwhelming shift that shattered everything they thought they knew. By the time they realized what had happened, it was too late. Their confidence had betrayed them. The very complacency they had indulged in turned into the reason for their downfall. You didn't just win. You made it inevitable, made them blind to it until it was already done. Victory wasn't just something you claimed. It was something they had unknowingly handed to you the moment they believed they had won. And when they fell, it wasn't a defeat. It was a complete, undeniable collapse. In the end, you didn't just survive, you reshaped the entire landscape. Every step you took, every move you made was a testament to something deeper than mere strength or tactics. It was the power of the mind, the art of war, and the mastery of timing. You showed the world that true power isn't always about being the strongest or the loudest. It's about being the most unpredictable, the most relentless, and the most prepared to fight when it truly matters. You broke their expectations, shattered their pride, and left them questioning everything they thought they knew. They were defeated not by force, but by the weight of their own mistakes, by the brilliance of your strategy, and by the inevitability of your success. What they couldn't understand was simple. Victory isn't just about taking the throne. It's about making sure no one ever dares to challenge you again. Your legacy isn't just written in the battles you won, but in the way you changed the game, turned the tables, and left your enemies in ruins. You weren't just a victor, you were a force of nature, and in the end, they knew it. You didn't need their acknowledgement, their praise, or their understanding. You needed only one thing, the victory that was always yours to claim. And that, in the end, is what makes you truly unstoppable. If you've enjoyed the journey we've taken through this story of unyielding triumph, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter. Hit that notification bell so you'll be the first to know when we drop more game-changing insights, strategies, and untold tales of those who dared to redefine the rules. Join the ranks of the unstoppable, because when you subscribe, you're not just following a channel, you're becoming part of a legacy of greatness. Don't miss out. This is just the beginning.